Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Austin Private Wealth, a registered investment advisor focused on fee-only financial planning and investment management. Their mission is to serve affluent clients with personalized financial advice, fostering a trusted relationship that will endure for generations to come. Austin Private Wealth is not just about managing wealth. They're about inspiring you to embrace a future filled with possibilities and helping you architect enduring legacies. Their core values of integrity, service, caring, excellence, and growth are at the heart of everything they do. Connect with them today at austinprivatewealth.com.
Austin Private Wealth is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Austin Private Wealth and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Austin Private Wealth unless a client service agreement is in place. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
We're hitting the digital road again to learn from our fellow ecosystems and to see what's happening around the country. Our stops in this episode include Atlanta and Nashville, where we talk with Blake Patton, managing partner of Tech Square Ventures, and Brian Moyer, president and CEO of the Nashville Technology Council. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for having us.
I'd love to start off with you telling us a little bit about yourself and the region you're talking about. So, Blake, why don't we kick it off with you?
Sure. So I'm Blake Patton. I'm the managing partner of Tech Square Ventures. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia. We are an early stage venture firm investing in enterprise or B2B and marketplace technology companies, primarily at the seed stage. Our focus as a firm is we believe what entrepreneurs need more than capital is access to customers and markets. So we've built our platform to help entrepreneurs do that. We follow what we call a market-led investment insight approach that we power through our Engage partnership with 15 large global corporate industry leaders. And we work with these companies. These are companies like Invesco and Georgia Pacific, the Home Depot, Georgia Power, Delta, Coca-Cola, you get the picture, and others to understand their innovation needs. And then we run a program called Engage, which is a go-to-market accelerator program for startups, where we connect those startups with those industry-leading corporate partners in partnership with Georgia Tech to help them get access to those markets and get those early customers and partnerships. So it's been super successful. We've had over 100 contracts between our corporate partners and those startups to date. So we invest out of our early stage fund, and then we have our Engage Accelerator program.
Great. And Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Moyer. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Nashville Technology Council. We are a trade association representing the tech sector here in Middle Tennessee in the Greater Nashville area. We've got about 600 member companies. So I'll be coming at this from a slightly different perspective than Blake, from more of a general tech perspective and economic development. Our companies, our member companies, represent everything from pre-revenue startups to kind of a who's who of Nashville. That would be all of the major corporate players here. I mean, our take is every company is a tech company these days. And we're here really focused on that and growing the tech talent pipeline. You know, talent's the currency of the future. And that's been one of the things that we've been focused on for the last 5 years.
So let's stick a little bit down with Nashville, Brian. And can you describe a bit about the ecosystem and, how big is it? What kind of, what kind of industries are there? Give me a flavor for Nashville.
Yeah. So people hear Nashville and think either Jack Daniels or music. And
not bad.
Music
things
City
to know.
is Music City is the brand that we love, and we're not looking to change that in any way. And I think that that ties very nicely into technology, which we might get into here in just a second. But to tell you, to help understand what it is that kind of makes Nashville grow, the first thing is, our GDP has been growing at it's grown almost 41% over the past 5 years. That was $136 billion in 2020. We don't have the 2021 numbers. I will tell you that, and I don't think we're unique in this, that it was on a very consistent growth phase in 20. It took a little dip. I think probably every GDP in the country, every market in the country did that. But what really is behind those numbers? I mean, we talked about music city, music and entertainment. Music and entertainment represents about $15 billion in economic impact and about 41,000 direct jobs here. Healthcare, and people don't realize this if you're not familiar with the region, represents $67 billion in direct economic impact and 167,000 jobs. So it's 5x the impact of music and entertainment. And we're in no way looking to change our brand to Healthcare City. It's going to stay Music City, but healthcare is a significant part of the economy here. And then to round that out, you've got manufacturing with about $70 billion and tourism, of course, with about $7.5 billion. Where we position technology is horizontal across all of those verticals. And so that's approximately an $8 billion economic impact and about 70,000 workers that are involved in the tech economy here.
Exciting and fast growing. Blake, what's going on in Atlanta?
Yeah, I think, I think the same's going on across all the Southeast. We like to talk about the super Southeast, kind of from Texas to DC, as the fastest growing innovation region in the country. And Atlanta's a little bit of a hub of that activity. Similar to what Brian shared, obviously Atlanta has tremendous GDP. I don't know exactly, probably in the 350 billion range, and has grown, by at least a third over this last decade. What a lot of people think of when they think of Atlanta is our base of Fortune 1000 headquarters and regional headquarters. I think we have something like 29 Fortune 1000 companies headquartered here. What I often see, especially the tech community, is people know the logos of these big companies, the Coca-Colas, et cetera. But what I think is a little bit of our special sauce, I know we'll talk about this as we go through the conversation, how it relates to the technology community, is that these are companies that are leaders across diverse industries. They're not all in the same industry. And that gives the region a really dynamic kind of growth base that we can get into later about how that matters for the tech community. Atlanta has definitely gotten on the radar screen, I think, nationally for investors, with large exits, unicorn type exits, the MailChimps and the Green Skies. We've probably had a dozen plus unicorns in the last 2 years. Companies like Stored and SalesLoft and Calendly and OneTrust, Greenlight, and others. We kind of have.
Now
all
you're
the
just
core
bragging,
ingredients.
Blake.
Yeah, I know. We've got a lot to brag about. We've got all the core ingredients, I think, that make a ecosystem thrive. Georgia Tech and ATDC have been at the heart of that for years. ATDC is the state startup incubator here at Georgia Tech. We're behind me here out the window. I'm located in an area called Technology Square, right beside Georgia Tech's campus. That's kind of a thriving hub of a lot of innovation activity. We've got world-class research universities, of course, Georgia Tech, Go Jackets. I'm a Yellow Jacket myself, but, the HBCUs, as we talk about diversity in tech, you can't solve that without solving that in the Southeast. And Atlanta and the HBCUs, we've got a great advantage and opportunity there. And, I could kind of go on and on. I think the other recent, the other thing I'd highlight is we've seen a lot of the larger tech companies starting to move and open significant operations in Atlanta. Companies like Microsoft and Google and Cisco, establishing large presence here. So I think, according to PitchBook, Georgia is the second fastest growing state in terms of deal count in the past 5 years. The Southeast also is, I think, the second fastest region looking backwards. I think, though, if there was a way to capture a current snapshot, my guess is the Southeast is the fastest growing, and we're excited to be based here and and just see nothing but good things. I'm an unabashed champion of Atlanta, but I think what it's really about is, I think what we really have this opportunity to do in the Southeast is think about it as the Southeast. We're spread far enough apart, lots of talents being attracted to the region, and there's just so much opportunity here. And so we love Nashville as much as we love Atlanta.
It's an interesting question. We had a recent episode with Dale Buss from the Flyover Coalition talking about some of the same idea of this kind of, in this case, it was, what used to be called flyover region, right from the Appalachians to the Rockies, and these kind of super regions. How do you see the super Southeast like actually interplaying with each other outside of being a branding in this mega region, in this region, and being able to kind of pull that narrative forward? But where do you actually see the interplay? And this is a question to both of you in this case.
Yeah, I can take a first stab at that. I completely agree with Blake that, I'm unabashedly a champion of Nashville, but we actually, at every opportunity that we have, we're working in collaboration with Atlanta and with other Southeast cities to really build the Southeast brand. People call me and say, "Oh man, did you hear that Austin got this deal, or Atlanta got this deal, or Miami got that deal?" And it's like, it's all good. Anything that's coming in from the coast and distributing the wealth is a win for, in my opinion, is a win for the nation. But in particular, I've been down to speak at events. We're inviting people up from Atlanta on a somewhat regular basis to speak at events that we have. And I think that selling the Southeast is important. And I think, obviously we could probably do more there, but we certainly try to tout not just Nashville, but the Southeast in general with any of the marketing that we're doing.
I think it's easier probably for us to say that in Atlanta because we're kind of the hub, and it's a natural destination for young people early in their careers, in the region. But look, we need access to talent across the Southeast. And when you think about the fact that the Southeast, I think, is 23% of the nation's GDP, but it's only 7% of the nation's venture capital investments, I think it's about opportunity as well. And so, it's the talent is connected here. There are world-class research universities spread out to the Southeast. I think the best way I can put it is, I think in the Southeast, there's this focus on innovation, not just startups, but everyone. The big companies are focused on it for innovation. Universities are focused on it for commercialization and for attracting the best and brightest students. Governments are focused on it for job creation. And so there's just this spirit and embracing of innovation that is actually bringing together and connecting the talent base. And frankly, even as it looks in the startup community, we, I shared that statistic, the 23% of the GDP, but only 7% of the nation's venture capital. We as a region have been used to having to collaborate together to get just about any deal done or just about any company through its life cycle. So we just have a collaborative spirit here that I hope sticks and retains as we grow. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think this, some of the other regions that have, you've got the Valley with a really high concentration of tech companies, or New York with a really high concentration of financial services companies, et cetera. The diverse industries that I talked about really matter. I don't know how to explain very well to people from outside of Atlanta or outside the Southeast this incredible spirit of economic development here. These corporate leaders are probably responsible for creating that culture in the sense that they're willing to work together. I described pretty briefly our Engage program offering. What I didn't tell you. So in addition to our early stage venture fund, which is like any other venture fund, we invest in seed stage companies. We have this accelerator program, but what everybody doesn't see is the work we do with these large corporate partners to understand their innovation needs. Their CEOs of most of these companies I mentioned serve on a board for us. They have executives where we put together working groups around strategic focus areas, things like supply chain, where they share knowledge and share with us and help us look for startups that are solving their problems. There's just, I think, a different spirit of collaboration in the Southeast, some of it born out of necessity, some of it born out of that spirit of economic development. That's what I think is exciting. And our the research universities. Obviously I champion Georgia Tech, being a Georgia Tech grad, but we have Emory, UGA, right? And as you branch out across the Southeast, all these amazing research universities collaborating. So I think it's born out of somewhat necessity. I think we've been led that way a little bit by our corporate leaders who have demonstrated what success looks like doing that. And I think the entrepreneurial ecosystem is both benefiting from that, and the talent just moves around the Southeast so easily that it's kind of happening naturally.
I think it's the key phrase that we tend to use a lot, and you've used it as well, is it's the innovation ecosystem, not necessarily the startup ecosystem, because it is that interplay between the large companies and the small. You have the obvious things such as partnerships and acquisitions, but you have talent moving, you have ideas moving, right? And you have this kind of collaboration, and hey, we have this problem and we're kind of telling it to the ecosystem, and some small entrepreneur says, hey, I can solve that for you and build a company. And then I think it's also interesting that collaboration and what the ecosystem is creating, which then creates the new kinds of innovations. And so, like Brian, you mentioned that health tech is a big part of that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I know Tenet, I think, is based in Nashville, and a lot of kind of things being born out of those larger companies being there, having the needs, and then being able to spill off talent and spilling off ideas to then create that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So how are you seeing that kind of cross innovation, collaboration, and integration in Nashville?
Yeah, so let me follow up first on the comment that Blake was making about just the collaborative spirit here. Part of what I attribute that to is just Southern values and a different way of living and doing business than you might find in some of the other bigger markets. And that's been kind of a common theme. People come here and it's like, I can't believe how easy it is to get appointments and how friendly and collaborative everybody is. And we don't have a corner on that market. There's many in the Southeast that have those same qualities. But I think that's an important quality and attribute to point out. So to your question, Jason, there's actually 20 public companies headquartered here that are in the healthcare space. So that's where this incredible 167,000 workers, that's where that density comes from. It's funny, I talk to people in other markets. A friend of mine in Seattle, I was on a panel with, and he said, "So what's your main industry?" Healthcare. Oh yeah, we got a hospital. We got that covered. Yeah. And we actually have more workers in healthcare here than they do in tech in Seattle. So people don't understand what that means. But just like you were mentioning, Blake, the representation of the major corporate players, many of them, we have a very large board of directors for our organization, and almost every single corporate player here is a member of our board. It's a really large board, but we get so much crossover and collaboration going that I think that is important. And a lot of the skills, just looking at it from a tech perspective, whether a software developer is a software developer, a security specialist, a network engineer, whatever it is, there might be a little subject matter expertise that goes into healthcare versus manufacturing versus finance. But generally speaking, it's the same skill set. And I watch people move between those different industries, which is why we really like to position ourselves in a horizontal place there, because we do support all of those industries.
No, it's great. What are you seeing in terms of like the general trends in the innovation company? So Blake, you were earlier mentioning all of these unicorns. Is it they're going public and staying and becoming kind of massive players? Are they getting bought? Are they getting bought locally, leaving? What are we seeing in terms of, how the entire, company life cycle is occurring?
Look, that is such an important question. It's too early for us to answer yet. We've certainly seen some very large exits. Most of our unicorns are kind of that I was rattling off, or a lot of them are recent unicorns. In the past, we've seen both. We've seen these companies go on to be, publicly traded companies, and we've seen them be industry leaders or get acquired. Probably certainly more have been acquired. on the journey. But I think for the Southeast, that is that's something to be seen as do we, give birth to these category changing pillar companies that stay in our community for a long time. In Atlanta, MailChimp was one of those for forever, and all of us sort of took it for granted that would never exit. But that that did. But they play that kind of role, and so I do think that's something I hope we see more in Southeast. And one of the things that to kind of add to what Brian said in those industry expertise, these I joke sometimes talking with startups and entrepreneurs, we tend to see big companies and think of them as not being innovative or they're slow or, gosh, these big dumb companies. And, we've had this front row seat working with these corporate leaders and their CEOs. And, they lead their markets for a reason. They have the smartest talent, in that space and in their industry. And, the challenges for them to innovate, are all over the board, right? Depending on the company and what space they're in. And that creates all these amazing, innovation and entrepreneurial opportunities. When we think about, Silicon Valley or other regions where it's all about startup and go there to raise money, you can come to places like Atlanta or Nashville, right? As an entrepreneur, that's you come here to get your customers, right? You come here to get access to the market and to grow. And that is, that's just really benefiting the region. And so I think we're at this unique, sort of point in history where everybody's focused on it. And I can tell you, firsthand from working directly with these corporate partners, they're very focused on innovation. You tell me any other city in the country, this Friday, we have one of those meetings and we will be in the room with the CEOs of these Fortune 1,000 companies all in a room together talking about innovation and startups. Tell me where that's happening anywhere else, in the country, in the world. And we're just so, lucky to have that. But kind of like Brian talked about industry examples too, something Atlanta and Tennessee kind of share in common is there's sort of a corridor from Atlanta to Chattanooga that's, a leader in logistics, right? You've got 70% of the nation's credit card transactions being processed here in Georgia, right? So that there's a natural leadership opportunity in fintech, right? We have our own health tech kind of opportunity here, right? Leaders in SaaS and lots of different SaaS companies and marketing tech, cybersecurity. So I love that this sort of B2B expertise, this enterprise expertise that's developing here in the Southeast, and I think you'll see more and more of that opportunity being born out of the talent that has the real domain expertise that Brian was talking about, right? In healthcare and other industry sectors. So that's, I think, is going to be an enormous competitive advantage. And when you think about industries like energy and healthcare and, that just have to change, right? We just know innovation is coming. It has to change. That's a huge opportunity for this region.
So when you look at, even though healthcare is such a significant part of our economy, and I have a much shorter list, Blake. In the past 6 months, we've hatched 2 unicorns, and we're pretty darn proud of that. One is Built Technologies, which is in the fintech space, and one is Silicon Ranch, which is in the renewable energy and solar space. So it's interesting to see that growth outside of the traditional healthcare. I mean, we've had several IPOs here in the past 18 months. It's interesting because this activity didn't diminish due to COVID. It actually seemed to accelerate. So Change Healthcare went public, and we've had some other companies that have gone public here over the past, mostly in the healthcare space. So that's where we're seeing a lot of that activity. But aside from that, several of our other large exits, many of them have been in fintech, which is exciting to me because I want to see some diversity with that. So we haven't had many of the billion-dollar exits that you've had. We're looking forward to that, but we've had several $500 million, $600 million dollar exits, which is still significant because it's still generating this new set of millionaires, and in some cases with the IPOs, billionaires that are staying here and reinvesting those dollars back into the economy. That's where the magic starts to happen. And that's not something that happens overnight. That's something that's been in the works for many years. And we're just now seeing the fruits of all that work that's gone in.
Brian, I think that's a great point. And it's not just the money. I joke that some of what's going on in Atlanta now is all of us .com kids are in our 40s and 50s. And so, we've been doing this together, right, for 20, 30 years. And we know each other. We know how to build teams. We know the core talent base here. We have a critical mass, of leadership teams we can put together to build these companies. But in addition to just, hey, it creates wealth for people willing to invest, which I'll come back to. But what it really does is becomes, a tree for the talent. And, each of these exits, no matter how big, spins off, a dozen or so experienced tech leaders that go on to do bigger and bigger things. And that becomes a flywheel. Back, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, there was a law firm here in Atlanta, in town, Morse Manning, that drew a tree. And it kind of showed some of the early, tech leading companies, the Scientific Atlantas and the next generation, the IXLs and the ISSs, and just kind of where all the talent went, how it connected to the companies in the next generation. It was really cool. I wish somebody would do that and update it for today. And again, back to, I think all the things we talk about, how do we increase entrepreneurial activity? How do we increase, diversity in tech, all those things? That's the answer. It's those core teams. And as these companies succeed, right, those are the ones that go on to become the leaders of tomorrow's, high growth tech companies. And then one more point to Brian's point about the money, that becomes, I think, one of the things Atlanta has a little bit maybe of an advantage and head start on in the versus maybe other areas in the Southeast, and hopefully we can leverage that. But I've seen, for sure, Tennessee and Florida, I would also put in this bucket, is a strong and developing angel ecosystem, both from these entrepreneurs that have had earlier success, but also, in this kind of low yield environment, you're starting to see one of the challenges in Atlanta is that most people didn't make their money in technology, and that's been a barrier to getting, there's plenty of capital in Atlanta. It's just alternative assets that meant real estate and private equity, not venture. So it's been a long road to get that money flowing, but the current environment has helped accelerate that. And, we just finished raising our early stage fund, and there's not that base of sort of institutional capital that you might see in the West Coast or the Northeast here, but we got tremendous support, right, from high net worth individuals, from family offices, from the wealth management firms here, and from the corporations. They're all starting to understand both the opportunity and the need. Again, I think when we talk about these big companies, and I'm sure Brian can probably speak to this for the healthcare. We have Wellstar as one of our corporate partners, so I know I hear this from them. These companies recognize how important it is for the region to have this activity and to attract this talent. They know that they also can attract the talent and build their innovation efforts here. They know that their talent they're trying to hire also wants to be in regions with that activity going on. I just think this is sort of this great opportunity in the Southeast. And we have, in the past, the question was there the critical mass? There was sort of this, I heard this sort of backhanded compliment more often than I like to. People would describe entrepreneurs that had success in the Southeast as two boats in a Cadillac. So the joke was that you had some success and then you didn't get back into the ecosystem. That is definitely not the case now. If you look around what's driving Atlanta, these are all people who have built and had massive prior success, and they're still in it and they're still building, and so that dynamic that Brian's talking about, I think, is really is key. And then Jason, I think your question's right on too. Is will we begin to develop our own base of these pillar companies that go on for years and years to define the community? Lift up earlier stage companies, be that customer, be that place where talent rotates in and out of. And I think the answer is yes, but it's a little early to say.
I was just going to say that Nashville has become, and I've been a part of this, really, really good at attracting corporate headquarters and corporate expansions. The big ones here that has gotten all the press is Amazon moving in and committing to 5,000 jobs, and Oracle coming in and committing to 8,500 jobs, and Capgemini coming in and committing to 1,000 jobs. We've gotten really good at that. What we need to be better at is launching the next, in our case, HCA is, the big player in town. It's a 50-year-old company, but it was founded here. The impact that corporate player has had on our economy, Amazon will never match. Oracle will never match. Even with these billions of dollars of investment that they're making in our economy, it's never going to match what this company that was launched here and has grown to become such a great corporate player. So that's what I want us to focus more on. And to all of your points, is we need to be growing more of those companies.
You're absolutely right.
And I think as we've seen that, we've also seen, one of the things that we launched TechSquare Ventures in 2014, right? So we're relatively young firm, and we were one of the only institutional seed investors at the time. Now we sort of have these dozen, venture firms here, all deploying capital, all building. It's much easier for us to work together to fund these companies as they grow, and that maturity of both the angel and the venture ecosystem, has for the first time given us some bandwidth, at the top of the funnel. The capital from out of town comes and pretty easily for the companies as they mature or later stage, but that top of the funnel, you sort of have to take care of locally, and we're starting to develop that and expand that capacity. So it's not just TechSquare Ventures. There's firms like Panoramic and Overline and Knoll. There's firms that are focusing very much on diverse entrepreneurs. Firms like Colab, Panoramic and Valor Ventures. And so I just feel like we have this really healthy mix and lots of energy. And like I said, even though I saw the stat on PitchBook, Southeast was the second fastest growing region, and Georgia's the second fastest state, based on deal count in the last 5 years. I think we're probably, my humble opinion, my guess is we're sort of number one right now in terms of momentum. And instead of talking about being the next Silicon Valley or, Austin or whatever, right? We're just the Southeast, and we're just Atlanta, and it's working.
I wanted to follow up on that, because absolutely what we're seeing now is it's not the Silicon this or the Silicon that. It's the first Nashville, the first Atlanta, the first Austin. And each one of those has a special sauce. And Brian, we talked about healthcare. We've talked about the Music City aspect. What's that special sauce?
Yeah. So as I'm describing it, and reporters more than any are, always calling and saying, I want to talk about how Nashville compares to Austin. I want to talk about how Nashville compares to, are we the next Silicon Valley? Are we the next San Francisco? And my answer is always the same. That's not what I want. I want Nashville to be the best Nashville they can be. That's where the success comes. So as I describe it, Michael, our secret sauce really goes back to these Music City roots in the creative community that exists here. So for more than 100 years, people have been moving to Nashville to pursue their dream of a career in music. It's a very entrepreneurial journey. And so that whole understanding of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and to go out with nothing and try to build something is truly baked into the DNA of the people here. So that's one side of it and how it relates to the entrepreneurial community. The other side is I made this journey myself. I was never a Nashville musician, but music was a very important part of my life to the point that I considered the potential of doing that professional. And then later, I taught myself to code. So the skills that are required to be a good musician are so similar to the skills that are required to be a good software developer in particular. And that is kind of the mathematical underpinnings and the creative side of things, that there's so many people that have moved to Nashville to pursue careers in music. And maybe some of them actually succeeded in that. And they've been on the road and they just want to get off of the road and go to the next stage of their life. Maybe some of them never got to that spot and they're still waiting tables, waiting for their break in music. But they still have those underlying skills And we've seen hundreds of these people go through our boot camps and move over into very successful careers in technology. And then my final point, and I'll let Blake answer. We were in the headquarters of YouTube several years ago on an outbound economic development trip. It was actually my first trip to travel with the pros from the state and the city and the chamber. And I'm listening to them do their pitch. I'm taking notes. And it was all about the cost per square foot of office space and the cost of housing and the cost of labor. And finally, this guy very astutely says, well, hey, if all you have to sell is cheap, there's much cheaper places than Nashville that we can move to. And I felt maybe I could say something at that point. And I said, if all you're looking for is grunt labor to mindlessly code, then Nashville really doesn't have anything to offer, and you should go, somewhere else. But if you're looking to expand to an area that is less expensive than San Francisco, but where your team can get plugged into a creative community that's really second to none, and we can argue what that means between us and Austin, but that's really second to none, then where they're going to be better because of the people that they can interact with, then Nashville's where you want to come. And he seemed to understand that, with the whole Music City brand, and that was something that made sense to him.
Yeah, look, I think for Atlanta, we've talked about we really have all the ingredients to be a thriving tech hub, and we kind of have them in spades, maybe with the exception of access to capital, but that's improving. And what makes Atlanta, I think, special, and it is that harder to communicate thing, it's, people will, economic development people will, as Brian said, will talk about cost of living, quality of life, and, we have the number one airport and things like that. And those all matter. We talk about the 29 Fortune 1000 companies, that all matters. But I think the Atlanta special, unique sauce is it really is this just spirit of collaboration and this access to the people who can and want to help, and how that translates for a startup. Like I said, I believe how we're leveraging is this is a great place to build a startup. You have access to talent, but more importantly, you have access to the customers and markets you need, right, to grow and succeed. And Atlanta is a global city. And so that access, spreads out from there. So I think our diversity starts with the things that our economic development people, what people already know about Atlanta and have known for years. I think it starts with that, these leaders across different industries. And it has become a key ingredient in us as an innovation city. And when you add that to that, spirit of collaboration and Southern hospitality Brian talked about, you get a really special place to build an early stage, high growth tech company. And, and then if you can back that up with being a terrific place for accessing talent, which this clearly is, talent with domain expertise and, talent coming out of these world-class research universities. And, we don't just have good universities, right? We have, leading universities here in the Southeast. And when it comes to, a tech and engineering school, right, Georgia Tech is, on the short list of, and Georgia Tech has enormous impact economic development wise here in Georgia, but Georgia Tech and the other research universities, the HBCUs, the Emory's, the UGAs, the Georgia States, there's just an amazing talent base here. So I guess if I had to say it in one word, I'd say this, collaboration, but it's the fact that it's collaboration across all these amazing resources that we're blessed to be building upon here.
I want to follow up on that because, Brian, you've talked about entrepreneurship baked into DNA. You've talked about creativity. And in Blake, you've talked about the collaborative aspect that's baked into the culture in your respective cities. And those are the things that don't get called out upon, Brian, for example, when you get those reporters calling and asking you. So what's the narrative that each of your cities bring to the table when those reporters ask? Because Blake, you talked about how PitchBook is saying, the Southeast is 4 or 5, second, third, whatever, according to PitchBook and that kind of thing. And that's what reporters tend to glom onto. But it's really this narrative is much broader than just that. So when you're answering reporters, what's the narrative?
It's very much what I just described. One of the first things I did 5 years ago, because I heard, from our board, from our team, all these different stories, that were being told, all these different talking points. And so we put together a talking points document and we distributed it to our team and to our board and said, when somebody asks about what's going on in Nashville, these are the talking points that we want to focus on. And we've updated that every year, at least since then. But I think we've gotten a lot better at that, telling the story and describing what makes Nashville unique. I will put in a plug for a initiative, a campaign that launched last year called Tech into Nashville. So there's a website that's aligned with that. That this is a national campaign to tell the story of what's going on from a tech perspective in Nashville. And we're actually targeting 6 different markets, not Atlanta. We're targeting Chicago, DC, New York, Boston, LA, and San Francisco, Silicon Valley. So it's designed to target and recruit talent into town, because even though we've given our best effort over the past many years to grow our tech talent pipeline, the demand continues to grow faster than the supply grows. And so, there's many different components to that, but one of them is recruiting from the outside. And that's what this campaign is designed to do. And so that has caused us to get very specific with our talking points and the way we're going out. So I would encourage you to look. There's a video that we put together that talks about why Nashville. I'm sure Blake has all the same stuff that he can point you to, but that's how we're addressing that, Michael.
Yeah, Michael, I'm smiling because I sometimes joke, right? Atlanta is world-class at doing that. We are world-class at economic development. That's why, we're so good at recruiting large companies here. That's how we convince the world to host the Olympics here, right? There's just so much great things about the city, the sports, everything, that story that you were kind of talking about is the story Atlanta usually puts forward, right? The more typical economic development growth story of built to attract, built to get things that aren't here to move here, which is different than saying, how do we tell a story about why it's great to build things here, and how do you build things here, and why you should build things here, and that's starting to emerge. And what I think is so before I get to the reporter question, what has been encouraging to me is that the leaders from what used to be these different communities, the tech community, the large company, et cetera, research development, that they're all coming together. And I think that's a big part of what we're doing here at Tech Square Ventures and Engage by bringing that community together. But, I'll just give you an example. Recently, our new mayor coming in put together a transition committee and invited myself and another person from the Barry Gibbons from Colag Capital, someone else from the tech community, to be on that transition committee, right? That's something you didn't see in the past, right? Is inviting the tech community into those conversations. So I guess first I would say that as a tech community, a lot of times the message that just gets out there is because Atlanta has such an engine to tell that economic development. If you want to see what that message looks like, go to places like the Metro Atlanta Chamber, who are phenomenal, do phenomenal things for the city, or Atlanta Committee for Progress. They do phenomenal things for the city and telling that story. So what do we say when, reporters call? It's interesting. Atlanta does not have as mature of for all the things I said we're maturing in, we don't have as mature of a kind of a news media for telling the tech story. Our traditional news sources, because real estate is such a big thing here, it's very deal-centric. And what attracts attention from reporters and how they talk about it and report it. So I think sometimes the bigger stories don't get told well, or what's going on here. We have some local sources like Hypotamus and others that do a good job telling, micro chunks of that story. But it's a good point. So look, I think we're just trying to make the entrepreneurs the hero of our story. I think we've got plenty of people who are paid and do a really good job shouting about Atlanta. We just want to shout about our entrepreneurs and the great things they're doing, help them succeed. So I think what you'll hear mostly when you reach players in the tech industry talk about Atlanta is we will say all the things you've heard me say today about we know we are so lucky and so blessed to have all these amazing resources here in the Southeast. We love, the entire Southeast, and we love that we have this opportunity to be kind of a hub of that activity, and that's a great vantage point to be. And we know that there are a lot of people that are professionals at telling that story and have been doing it for years, and we count on them to keep doing it. And we just want to tell the stories of what these entrepreneurs are building and help everyone see these special companies that, we talk so much about these corporate leaders. I sometimes tell, I teach an entrepreneurial finance class at Tech, and I always tell the students, the average lifespan of the company on the S&P is 17 years now. It used to be like 60 years back in the 50s and 60s, So we are great at talking about our Fortune 1000, right? What we're doing now is we're building what those Fortune 1000 are going to be in 10, 17, 20 years from now. That's what we're building now. And that's what I think we try to do when the media comes. But look, they see this spirit of collaboration. They're certainly noticing these unicorns. They notice we're getting attention initially off of transactions, and that's great, right? Whatever it takes.
This has been a whole lot of fun, digitally visiting your guys' cities. We always like to ask the same question as we kind of finish up. So we'll start with you, Blake. What's next, Atlanta?
Yeah. So I think what you're seeing for Atlanta is just, like I said, we've hit this critical mass and momentum. So I think part of what's next is, the pandemic hit right as we hit our stride. I am super excited to, it used to be super easy to connect to everybody in Atlanta. And now it's not as easy. And then, the pandemic. So I love, I can't wait to see what this community can do, as we start to come back together and actually get back to connecting with each other. The focus on innovation, bringing together the tech community, the big companies and the research, I think is probably going to be what you see Atlanta excel at. And, diversity in tech. I hope that Atlanta and the Southeast is a leader in that. We have to be, right? Half the nation's Black population lives in the Southeast. So I hopefully that's a big part. That's a big change that we see going forward too. This is a great place to build diverse teams.
Brian, take us home. What's next, Nashville?
Yeah. So there's so many good things happening here. We had the number one economy going into COVID, and we had the number one economy coming out of COVID. And there's just this incredible engine that's creating this growth. So I think what's next is we have to learn how to manage this growth a little better. People say, we don't want to become the next Atlanta. and they're referring to the traffic in Atlanta. But I think we need to start addressing, some of these infrastructure issues that before we're still small enough that we have the opportunity to react to this. We're already building onto our airport in a fairly major way, but really making sure that affordable housing and transportation. That we do a better job of addressing those things and driving equity. Blake touched on it. I think if we're going to continue to succeed in driving this growth, it has to be more equitable. We have to make sure that it's not just success and wealth for the few, but success for the many. And so those are high on our radar and priority list right now, is making sure that we're looking at every opportunity, from our perspective, that's looking at programs that can upskill workers to move them into the tech workforce. People that have the aptitude but have never had an opportunity. They just didn't know how to get there, how to do that. So we're trying to build those bridges. And then lastly, I think similar to what Blake said, continuing to drive innovation. So not just focusing on the corporate players and the corporate expansions and the moving of recruiting headquarters, but building the next headquarters here from the scratch and really offering those kinds of opportunities.
Brian Moyer, Blake Patton, thanks for joining the Austin Next podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us and giving us a chance to tell our story.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.